All right, our next speaker is Debbie Kingery, who is a partner in the Alabama-based mediation and arbitration firm of Perry Dampf Kingery Dispute Solutions. She graduated with a journalism degree from the University of Missouri and a law degree from Loyola in New Orleans. And then Debbie worked as a TV reporter, and then she got smart and she left and she became an attorney. And then, while raising her son and daughter as a part-time marketing director, she became a part-time marketing director for a large law firm. 4 years ago, her daughter, who was 21 at the time, was diagnosed with BPD. And in trying to learn more about the disorder, she discovered the NEA.BPD Family Connections course. She took that course and was later trained to co-lead it. And she is now one of NEA.BPD's newest board members and will be training a number of prospective course leaders over the weekend. And Debbie is here to speak from the family's perspective of the fear, sadness, frustration, and financial strain that is familiar to many people who have a family member with BPD.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And I just have to tell you, I'm so excited to be here. I'm just so honored to be among some of the leading experts in the country in BPD. And when the organizers first asked me to come here to speak, they asked if I had any PowerPoint slides. And I go, well, wow. Well, I'm not really teaching. I'm just kind of sharing. And so I don't have any bullet points, and I'm going to have the disclaimer like Randy. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a therapist. I'm just my kid's mom. And my kid happens to have borderline disorder. Now, I like to leave out the personality disorder because, frankly, I like my daughter's personality, at least most aspects of it. But along with borderline disorder, when she was a small child, she also had bumps in her socks. Do any of you know what I'm talking about? Yes. Let's see the hands. Bumps in the socks? That's amazing. I thought it was just... I don't know whether there's a link, but all I know is she had bumps in her socks. And when she woke up every morning and discovered those bumps in her socks, it would just drive her off the edge. She would go from frustration to anger to just out of control. And I remember her little chubby hands just desperately trying to smooth out that seam. And I was trying to smooth out the seam with her. And it was a tough way for our family to start the morning. The problem was, I had never had bumps in my socks growing up. Or if I did, I didn't realize it. And I didn't have a clue as to help her through these daily traumas that she experienced. Because her older brother, he was laid back, happy kid. He could have had thumbtacks in his socks and he would have never known. So I just didn't have a clue. And reflecting back, I bet there was probably a time when I said, honey, it's not that big of a deal. It's okay. And now, knowing what I know about borderline disorder, it was probably akin to telling her with a flaming hot piece of coal in her hand, honey, it's okay. It's not that big of a deal. Well, despite the bumps in her socks, my daughter did okay when she was growing up. She was a terrific student, fantastic athlete. Her teachers loved her. At home, she was a little bit more of a challenge, and we would affectionately refer to her as our strong-willed child. And we would reassure ourselves that the traits she displayed would really serve her well when she was an adult. So she did okay. She went off to college. Her junior year in college, she decided to study abroad in Chile. And so she went to Chile. She would call home occasionally, and she was the happiest she had ever been in her life. And we were thrilled for her. Until the day she called and she said, Mom, Dad, I'm so excited. I'm going to hitchhike from Santiago through Bolivia, through Colombia, through Peru, all the way to Fort Collins, where she was going to school. Oh. Well, for better or for worse, she didn't get a chance to hitchhike. She had a psychotic break before that time. And this is probably the point where her story is probably a lot of like your family stories. She was hospitalized, diagnosed with bipolar, put on medication. And I want to ask, there are a lot of family members here, how many of your relatives were diagnosed with bipolar initially? Pretty many. I think you had said 40% or something. That looks like 40%. Well, after that hospitalization, she was hospitalized 3 more times, oodles of medication, any number of diagnoses. And finally, after attempting suicide, she came home from the hospital the very next day after she was released. She walked in on my husband and I eating breakfast, and she said, "Mom, Dad, listen, I know you love me, but you're going to have to resign yourself to the fact that eventually I will kill myself." What do you do? Well, my husband and I, we took out a second mortgage, found the best residential treatment place we could find, and we sent her there, where I think they missed the diagnosis. They put her on a lot more medication, and after, I think, around $50,000 or $60,000, she didn't seem much better. So with, I believe, the wrong diagnosis, they referred her to a therapeutic farm. After around $20,000 or $30,000 there, she still wasn't much better. So then we finally found a psychiatrist at Emory here who we all loved. And he related to her. And he finally sat her down and said, "Taylor, I don't know what you have, but whatever it is, you got a bad case of it." She found that extremely validating. He took her off all her medication to see her in her raw state, and very quickly she was hospitalized, and even quicker she was diagnosed with borderline disorder. Life has been a struggle for my daughter, and as a result, it's been a struggle for our family, and I know it's been a struggle for all the families out there. And I just want to tell you, I have walked in your shoes. I've seen the rages. I've witnessed the heart-wrenching self-harm. We've had the police show up at our door. I've witnessed the holes in the wall. And actually, it wasn't my walls. It was my sister's walls. Because my daughter was living with my sister while she was getting DBT here in Atlanta. And during that time, and my sister was witnessing this, my sister so accurately said, "You know, all the family members, all the consumers, we're all a member of a club that none of us would have chosen to join." Well, I've been a member of that club for around 5 years now. And I want to share with you some of the lessons I've learned in coping with this illness, and many of the lessons I've learned through NEA.BPD's Family Connections program. First, I've learned to try not to solve all my daughter's problems. She used to call and calamity after calamity, truly, and just problems with relationships, and I would immediately jump in. "Oh, well, you need to do this, you need to do that." And when you think about it, that is just so invalidating, because if I solve all of her problems, what is that saying to her? That I believe that she can't solve her own, and she can solve her own. Along that same line, I've learned to give up having to be right. And this is hard because so often I see her making wrong decisions. But it's akin to the stubborn pedestrian who sees that crosswalk and, doggone it, I'm going to cross in that crosswalk, despite the fact that a car is barreling down on him at 70 miles an hour. Is he right? Yeah, he's right. He may be dead right. And that's what happens when you cling to being right. I was killing the relationship. And so now, if an argument starts erupting, I'll bow out. I'd rather save the relationship than be right. I've also learned that you have to have a healthy level of selfishness. And this is just so you can stay in the game. And I'll give you an example. And Randy spoke of it. And all of us, I don't say all, but many of us have experienced it. For a long time, when my daughter was at her worst, she would be calling in the middle of the night, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning, and just screaming and crying and suicidal. And, I don't want to be here anymore. I'm not supposed to be here anymore. We couldn't take it anymore. So finally, and with much coaching, I said to her, Tay, from now on, we're not answering the phone from 11 o'clock to 6 o'clock in the morning. We'll give you a call when we wake up just to see how you're doing. But no more phone calls. If you feel suicidal, if you think you're going to hurt yourself, you need to call 911. It took a couple of days, but the phone calls stopped. But that wasn't the purpose of that. The purpose of it was that's all we could tolerate. And we had to draw our boundaries in order to stay in the game and to stay connected and be there to help our daughter. The last thing I learned, that in order to achieve some calm in my life, I had to move to a place of acceptance. I'm fortunate in that my daughter only had one suicide attempt. And again, only in a club like ours would that make sense. Would anyone feel fortunate about that? But I remember after the suicide attempt, her bedroom was on the second floor, and I would be walking up the stairs to her bedroom. And I would start breaking out in a cold sweat. And I'd be walking up the stairs, and my heart would start thumping out of my chest because I was afraid of what I would find up there. I see heads nodding. I realized I couldn't live like that. And it's a slow process that I gradually had to move to a point of accepting the fact that there was a possibility that my daughter would kill herself. Now that I've moved to the place of acceptance, I realize there's a possibility she may kill herself, and that saddens me. But I don't feel like I have that guillotine hanging over my head and slipping each time she makes a suicidal statement. I've moved to the point of acceptance, and I've accepted that I can't make her do anything. I can't make her take medication. I can't make her go to the doctor. I can't make her do anything. And as a result of that acceptance and of giving up that fight, our relationship has improved. There's less stress on me, there's less stress on her, and lots of things have improved. I've also accepted that despite our love and care for our daughter, and despite our best efforts at parenting her, we may not have provided her the best environment possible. And that one hurts, because I really wanted to be a good mom. But unlike my son, who was like a dandelion of a child, you plant him in any earth and he will thrive, he's resilient, he could survive through anything. My daughter was an orchid. And she needed certain nutrients, she needed a certain amount of sunlight in which to thrive, and we didn't know how to do that. We did not know how to give that to her and teach her how to learn how to deal with the bumps in her socks and the stresses that life would throw at her. But fortunately, our relationship with our daughter isn't over. We're learning much better skills, better communication skills, learning how to provide a more nurturing environment for her. And we're learning that through lots of the writings, through the lessons taught by the experts here. And when I think about it, I look at them as the generals and the officers in the battle against borderline disorder. But who's the foot soldiers? The family members, the consumers, were the foot soldiers in that battle, and we're in the trenches 24/7. And we're figuratively and literally bleeding and dying in there. We need reinforcements. We need more DBT mentalization therapists, not just in the big metropolitan areas. I'm from Fairhope, Alabama. We need them all across the country. We need them in our community mental health centers because right now, treatment for borderline disorder is just for the wealthy. How many people can afford $1,000 a day for a residential treatment setting? How many people can afford twice-a-week therapy when insurance doesn't cover it? Oh yeah, insurance companies, they have a catch-22. They'll pay for it if a medical doctor provides it. How many of you know medical doctors who provide DBT? Oh, you know what? Anyone else? Anyone else in the... Oh, they want your number. I guess, oh, and one other thing for the clinicians out here. We need the clinicians to stop marginalizing family members if our relatives agree to getting us involved. Dr. Hoffman, Perry Hoffman, in her study, it said the more involvement by family members, even over-involvement, the better the patient fared and the fewer hospitalizations. If we were part of the problem, please let us be part of the solution. We're all fighting the same battle. We all want our relatives to achieve that life that's worth living that Marsha Linehan talks about. And I just want to end real quickly with a quick conversation I had with my daughter. She was very worried that my brother-in-law didn't like her because she worries about relationships, things like that. And I said to her, Taylor, I know for a fact Bob really likes you, but you know he's a newspaper editor and he doesn't like so much talking about gossip or people. He likes talking about issues. And she looks at me with that sincere, sweet face and she goes, I've got issues. She's got issues, I've got issues. I hope we can all agree that the battle against BPD is an issue worth fighting for. Thank you.